Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about the fork in your career. We're all going to encounter this at some point. And what I hope to get out of this is to question whether you really have two choices. And the fork in your career is whether you're going to continue coding or you're going to become a manager and stop coding forever. So that's a presentation. But first, let's talk about you. So I want to know, are you a senior member of your team currently? And are you a team lead? Do you lead multiple teams? And how many still code every day? Amazing. All right. So for those of you that don't code every day, I want you to think about why you don't, and we're going to talk about that later on. So about me. So first of all, I'm a husband and father of two beautiful kids. My daughter this morning told me, Daddy, use your words and don't be shy. So that's what I'm going to do. I spent the last 15 years wrangling software and people, and what that means is leadership is hard. And I heard this great quote about that people are not strongly typed. And that's what really leadership is about. You're trying to work with people. It's not software, it's not computers, it's not machines, and that's very hard to do. So my experience spanned small startups to large organizations. I worked in small teams of 2 up to large ones of about 100. And through these various size teams, I've seen different patterns and different, I guess, problems. And this fork in your career kept reappearing. Today, as of yesterday, I'm at FlashStock Custom. So FlashStock was acquired earlier this year or in the summer. We're still the same awesome company in a larger company now. So we're not the scrappy 100-person startup anymore. And now we're operating in this 1,000-person publicly traded company. So it'll be an interesting experience there, seeing how that, what we learn from that. So an engineer's career path. How many of you have searched online? What does it look like? What is the engineer's career path? What happens after you start off as an engineer? Nobody? Nobody cares? Okay, so this Dilbert cartoon really sums it up pretty perfectly. Your future will be just like the present, except you'll be older and you might own a less embarrassing car. When you do that search and you're looking at it, the similarities across everything you're going to find is that it's very linear. It's a single trajectory. You're going to be a junior developer. You'll become an intermediate developer. You'll be a senior developer. Maybe you'll become a principal engineer. Maybe you'll become an architect. But then you're capped out there. You hit this imaginary ceiling where now you're presented with this choice. It'll be like, now you're really good at coding, but now you need to manage a team. And you have to stop coding. But is that really a choice that you have to make? And what I want to share today is options that allow you to still do what you love, if that's what you enjoy, and still grow in your career. This commentary here is very common. So, a single trajectory, limited growth. It's very disappointing. And what's really disappointing also is that this response was to a recent graduate and asking about their career path down the road. And it got 76 upvotes. So why are we setting up our youngest engineers to say that your engineering career is really a stepping stone to something else? You're going to start here, and then you're going to grow into management or something else. So problem one with this is obviously it impacts our youngest engineers. We're setting them up for a career where engineering may not be a lifetime decision. Problem two, you invest a lot of time growing your team and invest in each individual. And why would you do that when at the end of the road they're just going to go somewhere else? So it's really important that to present that engineering is a rewarding career option. And it could be a lifetime kind of decision that you're going to enjoy. Imagine your kids. One of your kids is great at swimming. You wouldn't tell them, hey, you're so good at swimming, let's stop that. Become a dancer. That wouldn't happen. Why do we do that with our engineers? And then finally, problem three is the Peter principle. So progressing from a technical contributor to a manager is not a natural progression. Just like getting better at engineering and technology, managing and leading people also requires deliberate practice, and that takes time. So a great engineer may make a great manager later on, but that also still takes time. And just because they're a great engineer for 15 years may not make them a great leader later on. So why does this fork in our career exist? Why must we choose between these two paths? Why can't we do both and still progress and feel that we have a rewarding career ahead of us? So for those who have chosen the management path, it's not wrong. It's not the wrong choice, if that's what you wanted. But there are other options, and you don't have to just get stuck in kind of coding and not grow past that. How many of you chose the pure management path and actually stopped coding? All right, so the rest of this talk is not for you. In fact, I'm just kidding, no. So, a little bit more about me. So I grew up in an Arabic family in an Arabic country. My parents moved to the United Arab Emirates when I was born, and I spent the last 18 years there before I came to Canada in 2000. So being an engineer for me was really one of three valid career options. You could be a doctor. My mother was a pharmacist and worked at a hospital. I didn't want to go to school for 10 years. Plus, in high school, I was useless at all my biology and chemistry labs. So that was clearly not for me. And then the second option was being an engineer. Lots of areas of engineering. Obviously, in Dubai, civil engineering is very popular. I was surrounded. My dad was an engineer. My uncles were engineers. So everybody around me was an engineer. The last option, which is valid also over there, but that's not what I wanted to do either. So I chose engineering, went to McMaster University, studied software engineering. I learned all about that jazz, about software discipline and engineering and waterfall and how to build software and all that good stuff. When you're in Canada as an international student, you get, at the time at least, you get 3 months to find a job after you graduate. That didn't happen. So I enrolled in a master's program to stay in Canada, and then became a citizen after that. Anyway, the point is, I am an engineer. And I started off very young. My dad used to own a Radio Shack store, if you remember what that is. Today they're called The Source. And we had this computer. And it mesmerized me that you could make it do things. And the first thing I remember as a 4-year-old maybe, I was playing around with, I think it was called Paintbrush, the original name for Microsoft Paint. And I think the best version of Microsoft Paint. And what was really cool about this was you had, the computer was slow as shit, but you had, as you were drawing stuff, you could, and you wanted to fill this drawing, you would see this kind of pattern like slowly emerge across the screen. And I would spend days just like drawing all sorts of mazes and kind of like try and create something out of this computer. From there, I learned HTML, ActionScript, and built some Flash websites, and kind of got more interested into this computer. So the point is, enough about me, the point is engineering is supposed to be a rewarding career choice. And it's having the ability to create something from nothing is as close to magic many of us will get. And it doesn't have to stop. And I may be biased, but software is literally creating something from nothing. And you don't see it, it's invisible, and compared to other engineering disciplines. So I think there's a few reasons why we have this fork, and it comes from other engineering disciplines. For me, personally, I feel one of the biggest, comparisons that are made with software, building software, is buildings. That, you have to build the foundations first, and you get the foundations right, and then you go up higher and build all this other stuff. But there's a lot of differences between software and buildings. For one thing, software is abstract, it's dynamic, buildings are static, they're concrete. I've never heard of a civil engineer that got a client who 8 months in through the construction went back and said, hey, you know what? I want the garage to be 3 floors now instead of 1. That doesn't happen because people understand concrete. They understand the physics. They understand this is something they see. Software, on the other hand, is really only restricted by your imagination. And this imagination can be both kind of free. It can free you and it can constrain you at the same time. I thought this great quote from Paul King about imagination and experience, and really your imagination is constrained by your experience. At the same time, it's also, your experience opens up your imagination. So there's a nice duality there that exists in the software world, because the more you know, the more options you can take as a software engineer, but at the same time, the less you know, the more options you can take. So it's very interesting. For this reason, I think, although I have a software engineering background, I think software development is more art than engineering. And that's why it's so hard. And you can't manage art. You can't put process around art. You can try, but you'll always kind of hit up on the artistic side of software development. It's really difficult to manage. On the flip side, really, is let's say most of us are not building software for self-driving cars, where you will need that more rigor and discipline. Most of us are building software to increase people's productivity or entertainment, or just help them do something. The software that gives you some magical power. So if you start thinking about software in this way, a lot of things start to look different. So the second reason is because it turns out a lot of organizations look at software development as this factory that you're cranking out features or lines of code. And when you look at it as a factory, it's lots of processes, and there are people, and you can't really manage that stuff. But creating all this process requires a lot of management, and hence, eventually, managers will get rewarded more than engineers in a lot of organizations, because the larger the team, the more managers you need, and that's where this fork in your career starts to happen. Technology becomes a cost center when you start looking at software in that way. And as a cost center, it needs to be managed. The cost needs to be reduced, and it's just the cost of doing business instead of being kind of a partner in the business. So again, process requires management. Art doesn't. All of this, eventually, the best developers will switch to another company or to management to progress. You haven't created that future vision. You haven't painted that future path for them to say, hey, what am I supposed to do next? And that's a failure of leadership. So lots of things happen here. Interviewing people is hard, recruiting is harder, training and onboarding, all these costs, the impact on morale and the team itself. These are all issues that happen when you don't create a future path for your engineers to grow in from juniors to senior and beyond. You need to be able to hire, what you're hiring today are really your tomorrow's leaders. So if you don't see someone on your team that is going to be a leader later on, there's an issue there. That progression is natural, because otherwise they're going to leave, and you've invested all this time and energy for what? So how many of you think you're at that fork today or coming up to it? Okay, so how do we progress? So the thesis of this whole thing is that career progression does not mean you have to become a manager. In fact, Sheryl Sandberg put it best. Your career is not a ladder that you climb. It's a jungle gym. You're going to move sideways. You're going to go up. You're going to go down. But the important things that you should be focused on across your whole career, from beginning till you stop working, really, is what are the opportunities you have access to? What's the growth potential you have? What impact are you having? What's your mission? What's the real work? We had lots of great talks around vision and believing in that vision. Those are the things that progress your career. But first, why should you keep on coding? What benefit does that give you in whichever career path you choose? First of all, so estimation is hard, very hard, and most software projects are delivered late. The best of us could be a factor of 2 off when you're estimating. That's because it's not a mechanical process. It does not follow rigid rules. It's so abstract. Things change. Even if you've done it 10 times already. something new could happen, and that changes everything. The variables are too much to count, and you can't really estimate that way. If you're not a leader that codes, how are you going to tell the difference between a 2-day feature versus a 2-month one versus a 2-year one? This is a very important decision to make. And our estimates are not off because of lack of process. We have the largest organizations with infinite resources, infinite money, infinite time, and they're still delivering shit late. So it's not because we don't have process. They've hired the best process engineers in the world, and they still deliver late. So this goes back to the analogy of software and buildings. Software is abstract. It's hard to estimate and plan for it. So in the future, it's much easier for you to estimate if you can keep your experiences refreshed. You're not depending on experiences from 10 years ago to estimate what you're trying to do today. Second, we get to make better decisions. So should we tackle technical debt today? Should we lay the foundation for tomorrow? Should we replace that framework that's already 2 years out of date? These are all technical decisions that you're going to have to make. You're going to get your team is going to come with you with a bucket list of things we need to do. How do you decide what should we do now, what can wait till next month, and what we're never going to do? Better is something very hard to measure because it's always relative to your experience, and it's relative to something else. So presented 2 options, option 1 may be better than option 2, but under some condition, the second option may actually be better. So recognizing when 20% of the work is enough versus 80% is required is a very key thing that you need to be able to differentiate. You don't want to waste time, you don't want to waste resources, and that's a key differentiator. And if you're coding, you may succeed at this. You're in a unique position as a leader that codes. You get to understand your team's pain points. You will know which ones are real, which ones are just not. And everybody will have complaints about something. And you need to be able to know what's noise and what's real, what should you worry about. So what's unique about your position is that you can actually do something about it. If there's roadblocks in the way, you can get those out of your team's way. You can give them the space to actually solve this problem. But you're in a different position than the rest of your team to actually help them solve these pain points. You don't want to be that clueless executive that goes and says, hey, you know what? Back in my day, I could have coded this in half the time. And it's easy, it's simple. You want to be the humble leader, and you want to keep your experiences grounded in today and not back in the day. As a leader, big part of your job is to coach your team, to help them when they finally hit that fork in the road, and to kind of tell them what the options are and what you think is what you think is great about them and how they can proceed to the next stage. It's much easier to do that if you're leading by example. If you're still a technical kind of person, there's a lot of managers across the board that you can then connect your team with to learn about. Hey, I want to go into product management. Okay, so this is where you should talk to and learn from that. I think this one's important. So going back to that clueless executive, engineers will respect you more if you're able to hold your ground on a technical debate. If you can participate in this discussion and, more importantly, achieve buy-in from your team on some decision, they will follow through on that decision. A big part of any decision-making process, collaborative or not, is the probability for it to succeed heavily depends on the team's buy-in. If they bought into the decision, they will full-heartedly execute on that, and then they will remove anything in the way. But if they haven't, then they're not going to execute on it fully, and it's more likely to fail. So I look back at my career, and the best leaders personally for me were the ones that knew when to roll up their sleeve, when the team needed help, and how to help them, and when to get out of their way. These leaders I still remember today. I still talk to them today, and those are the important people that helped me through my career. So how do you take the next step? First of all, before we talk about that, there's the flip side of it. You know, you can progress through your career hopping between different jobs, and you will get that career progression. You will probably also get a nice, 20% bump with each step you take. The problem, though, is that leadership takes practice, and practice and leadership requires dealing with people. Requires building relationships. Every time you take that jump, you become the new person. You have to build trust all over again, and then you will never really actually get to practice your leadership. Second, assuming everything is identical, someone with progressive levels of experience at the same company is a more attractive candidate than someone who is not, who had the same experience at different companies. So if I went from junior developer to senior developer to team lead in one company in the span of 5 years, what's interesting about that is someone entrusted this person with more responsibilities over and over again. Someone else who made that same progression at different companies may just be a better negotiator. So that's a big difference between both. There's a great book by John Calvin. He's an American author, speaker, and pastor who has written many books on leadership. And he talks about the 5 levels of leadership. So level 1, it's the entry level of leadership. Level 1 requires really no ability to achieve. It's the level of title. People follow you because they have to. Because you're the director of engineering, they have to follow you. The problem with this level is that it only works if you have leverage. So in let's say a volunteer organization where volunteers don't really have to listen to you, level 1 leaders struggle to lead volunteers because they can, if they don't trust you, they're just going to go and find somewhere else to volunteer their time. So in this level, position does not automatically result in influence, but it's not all bad. This is a prime place for you to practice leadership and start that deliberate practice in improving your skills. Again, remember, it requires no ability to achieve. So this guy here, 500 plus titles as president, director, or chairman. I don't know what level, I'd say he's probably a level 1 leader, maybe level 2. But he has all these titles. Is he a good leader? Level 2 is called permission. In level 2, people give you permission to lead them. They've trusted you, you've built that trust, and they allow you to lead the team. So at this level is where you start to build influence. You start to gain respect with the team. Level 2 is where these solid relationships are built between a leader and their team members. It's the foundation for the rest of the levels. Trust is very important between a leader and the team, and within the team as well, as you've heard in other talks. So level 3 is production. So now people start to follow you even more, and you gain more influence when you've proven your credibility to the team. They've seen what you can do, and you can get stuff done. And that builds even more trust with their leader. You've got a track record that shows what you're able to do. So here, leading becomes more fun because then everybody is moving forward. The team's growing. The team starts performing at an even higher level. So one thing to note about all these different levels is that they're not a progression, and they build up on top of previous levels. So a level 3 leader is just adding level 3 tactics on top of what they were doing in level 2. Finally, this is, I believe, the ultimate leadership. There's one more after this, but most of us won't get to that level. But level 4 is people development. This is where you create new leaders. And that's really the ultimate test of leadership, is are you able to create new leaders for your organization or your team? The reason is simple. When there are more leaders, more of our organization's missions are able to be achieved. Your team is more scalable. You've built a solid team that can tackle on anything that that the organization decides on. When you create enough leaders, you reach the next level. But it takes a lifetime to kind of get to that. Level 5 leaders are ones that people follow because of what they represent. You know, people like Steve Jobs, people like this guy. So this is a level 5 leader. We heard from one of the previous speakers about their friend who shows up at 5 o'clock in the morning because they believe in what this leader's mission is and what difference he's going to make. But this takes a lifetime of deliberate practice to get to. So how do you become a hands-on technical leader? So before asking for that title, practice the different levels of leadership. Earn people's trust, be consistent, create other leaders. Those are all, levels 2 and above are things that you can do yourself. Level 1 is the only thing that gets given to you. The other stuff requires you to work for. So you want to be a CTO, start behaving like one today. Practice the 5 levels of leadership, even before you get to level 1. So some techniques to help you kind of maintain your coding abilities while you're in this leadership position. Today, I try to spend about 50% of my time on coding. I try and avoid becoming the bottleneck or put myself on a critical path. But I still keep my hands in the code. I do code reviews, I fix bugs, build small features. My job is to be involved, but not get in the way. So it's very important for you to include yourself in the sprint, be accountable for your team to finish something that you set out at the beginning of the week, and just build stuff with your team. Second is hard to do when you start off as a leader, so eyes on and hands off. You have to resist the urge to go in and fix things yourself, but you should be able to spot the broken things and kind of identify them. So, you know, if you're coding because you think you're the smartest person in the room, then you're doing it wrong. If you're coding because you think your team is struggling, then you've set up your team to fail. Also doing it wrong. If you're coding because you want to prove to others that you still got it, also you're doing it wrong. On the other hand, if you're coding to, you know, prototype stuff, uncover technical challenges, and bring up the team and make a better team out of all of us, those are good reasons to code. Number 3, hire engineers that are passionate about learning 100% of the time. These engineers are hard to find, but once given a problem, they're going to figure out how to fix it. And they don't require a lot of management. They just require, you know, this is what we're trying to do. You've set the context, and they will plow through anything to get there. This one's a thing you've heard today a couple of times, so don't micromanage. Your job is to lead the whole team. You can't be wasting your time on a couple of individuals, and you don't have time to do that. And if you're micromanaging, and you're not going to have time to continue coding yourself. You'll spend most of your time managing your team. Micromanagement breeds trust issues within the team. So that's also why it's something to avoid. And remember, you're a player coach. You're part of the team, and you have to, I guess, focus on the whole team as a whole. Managing upwards means, you know, don't allow everybody reports to somebody. Don't allow your leader to be nervous about something. And if you've hired the right team, you don't really have to manage down. You've set the context. They know what they're going to do. They're often doing it, and you're just kind of clearing roadblocks away from them and letting them do what they do best. So the best leaders manage from the bottom up. So over my career, I've learned a lot of lessons. And I'm going to share a few of these things, kind of leading those teams. So again, on building stuff, don't become the bottleneck. At that point, your team starts to break down. Be very selective about where you're going to spend your time. The tasks you take on as a coder at that point are not to kind of meet a deadline. They're about to, you know, uncover other issues or solve problems that will come up later on. But it's not about, you know, this current release, unless that's where you want to help. You want to pay attention to the whole team and how we're doing as a group, and iron out kinks in our workflow, that's why you want to continue coding. On growing your team. So remember those 5 levels of leadership. The ultimate leadership that we can all achieve is to create new leaders. So when, typically, let's say you start off as you're starting a startup and you're going to start hiring developers. It's very easy to start saying, hey, you know what, we're going to hire some junior engineers. And you're going to invest, and maybe they're cheaper, maybe they're easier to find. The issue is that you're not thinking about how you're progressing their careers. So start your hires with the senior engineers first. They're going to have more impact, and they're going to be able to build a team with you. Second, you're like a conductor. Your job is to keep your eyes open and hear the music. Make sure which instruments are not playing well, what needs tuning. You might have a brilliant person on the team, but if they're an asshole, just save yourself the trouble. Don't poison the well. This is the hardest part of leadership, the worst part actually, well, not the hardest. So besides for reasons of gross misconduct, there are 3 things to watch out for. You will make bad hires, and that's okay. That's part of learning. So the most important, and not that the TTC is not consistent, but the most important quality of a leader is consistency. You can consistently deliver results. Your behavior is consistent. There's no surprises. That consistency is something we can all practice from our most junior engineers all the way to our CTOs. So be consistent. Consistent people deserve more responsibilities, more opportunities, and more opportunities breed more capabilities. When you notice someone who lacks this consistency, that's something that's really hard to fix. So that's something to watch out for. Second, obviously, lack of skills or passion. So someone with a lack of passion is not going to grow as a leader. It takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of learning. So you don't want to waste your time on people that don't have passion. Remember, leadership isn't a skill that you have or you don't have. It's a skill that requires you to be deliberate about its practice. And that requires passion. And finally, team compatibility. So if you want to go fast, you can go way faster alone. But if you want to go far, you need a team to go far with. Your job as a leader is not to build a fast team. Your job is to build a team that can endure and go for the long haul. So that's much harder to accomplish than going fast. Remember, being fast is about efficiency. Once you have the right team, you can start improving efficiency. But you have to make sure that the team is capable of going a long way. So my final advice, so for you who reach this fork in your career, get a mentor. I go out for dinner once or twice every couple of months with mine, shoot the shit, learn about stuff, present what challenges I have, and try and learn from those. The Toronto TechMasters Slack channel is a great resource to find one. So we all need mentors throughout our career who will openly share their own lessons learned and ideas. And then when you land that senior leadership role, that's really the beginning of the road. It's now the real hard work starts. And now it's not just about you, it's about what you can accomplish with the team. So remember, you started your career as an engineer, you build stuff, you can continue to build stuff. You don't just have to go into management to progress. And that's the talk. Thank you very much.